Okay, welcome back. Today we are going to be taking a look at Chapter 8, Section 2, which our textbook here makes a nice move and really does a case study on migration. And when we're looking at migration, one of the key things to remember is that there are certain causes of migration. And our goal today is to understand, of course, what migration is, but then we're going to take a look at an example from the Bantu speaking peoples of Africa as to why they migrated, what are the effects of their migrations, and how the impact kind of affected the history of all of Africa, really, just by one group migrating. So we're going to take a look at that as we go. Roman numeral one, when we're talking about migration, we're definitely talking about people on the move. The definition that I want you guys to have down of migration is it's a permanent move, usually from one country or region to another. Okay. Now, there are several causes of migration. One thing that I would like you to think about are three categories of migration. Okay. Those three categories are environmental. So when we're talking about environmental, we're talking about geographics, we're talking about the surrounding lands, we're talking about weather patterns, we're talking about cultivatable land. Things of that nature would fall under the category of environmental. Now, economic, when we talk about economics, we're talking about money. We're talking about trade. We're talking about diffusion. We're talking about merchants and artisans moving from place to place, having a city to sell those goods in. So those are all economic factors. And then number three, political factors. Those would be referring to how people are treating you. You know, politically speaking, how is the government treating people? Are they overtaxing? Do you feel protected by the military? Is there a military? So you have a lot of factors that politics would be involved in there. Okay, of these factors, gentlemen, there are push-pull factors. Okay, there are push and pull factors, and these are factors that either push people out of an area, and pull factors are factors that pull people into an area. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is pause the video, and I want you to come up with about three push and pull factors for the categories of migration. So let's come up with two. Let's actually just come up with two push factors for environmental, two pull factors for environmental, two push factors for political, two push factors for economic, and then pull factors, two each on the pull factors for economic and also political as well. So go ahead and pause that. I'm going to give you the time to do that. Once you come back, I'll have a slide for you to take a look at here. Okay, so hopefully you did what I asked. Here's the answer is actually in the book. Here's some examples of environmental push factors: climate change, using up all the resources, an earthquake, natural disaster, volcano, drought, or famine. Okay, those are things that push people away. Things that might pull people into an area: abundance of land, valid natural resources, and excellent climate. Okay, let's take a look at economic factors. Okay, things that would push people out, things like lack of jobs, people being enslaved. That could also be a political factor too. Some of the pull factors, definitely when you're talking economics, you're talking about employment opportunities or job opportunities, right? So that would be something to think about there. Political factors, push away, push people out: religious persecution, ethnic cleansing, political persecution, war, okay, invasion. How about on the other end, things that pull people in politically? Mostly people are drawn to freedoms. Political and or religious tolerance would be something that would be a factor that would pull people or draw people in. Okay. So hopefully you did that exercise, and hopefully that helped you comprehend that basic material right there. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the effects of migration here, capital letter D. Life in a newly populated area begins to change because what you have is you have an influx of new ideas, new peoples, different cultural aspects. So you're going to have sometimes a period of conflict and sometimes a period of cultural diffusion. Okay. And sometimes as you drive through that, things get better and better. But at first, there can be some problems caused by migration. Now, the migrations are going to have an effect on both the people migrating in and the people who have already settled in the said community. Here are some of the effects of migration that are generally found in your textbook on page 222. Okay, so you've got redistribution of the population. This could change the population density. Some people may stay in a densely located part of a city. Some people may spread to the outskirts because of the influx. So you might have a change or redistribution of population density. You're definitely going to have cultural blending. That's a term that we've used throughout this year, cultural diffusion. You may have a mixture of languages, ways of life and culture may also be altered as well. Bullet number 3, ideas and technologies may be shared. That's cultural diffusion. We know that term. That's something that we know is going to happen. People's quality of life may be improved as a result of moving. If you're leaving an area that you've been persecuted for religious views and you come to a new area, that's a great positive move. You're going to get rid of that ideology. If you're leaving an area where you had no employment, you had a lack of jobs, you had a lack of agricultural farmland, and you go to a spot that you have a job and you have a steady source of income, then that's a win. Clashes between groups may create unrest, persecution, even war. That's a pretty basic one. Like I said, when you've got a mixing and a blending of people, you might have some conflict there. Environmental conditions could change. So you may go to a spot that you think the grass is greener on the other side, but then climate may change. You may have some issues there with the environment, and that could cause problems with your population due to a lack of food. Also, employment opportunities may dry up, creating unemployment and poverty. You may have an influx of people hearing, hey, City X is opening a factory and they've got a bunch of jobs open and a bunch of people move there, but hey, they only have so many, right? So not everyone's going to be able to benefit from that. Back in these times, they might have an abundance of farmland, but if thousands of farmers move into this region, you're only going to get a very small plot of land, and that may not be enough to support your family. Okay, so those are some of the effects of migration. Those are just some examples. There are more, but those are some of the sort of basic ones. Okay, let's go to capital E, tracing migrations through language. Language can actually tell you a lot about where people came from, where they settled, and how people were distributed. In Africa, one of the more popular languages is called the Bantu language. It's the language of the Bantu speaking peoples. It's spoken throughout Africa from areas south of Sahara all the way down to the southern tip, modern day South Africa. Bantu, the language, is the first language of nearly 1/3 of all African peoples. And Africa is the second largest continent. So that's a lot of people that speak the Bantu language. Roman numeral 2, talk about some of the actual massive migrations that occurred in Africa. And that's sort of why we're learning about Africa in chapter 8, but we're focusing on this concept, this skill, to understand of migration. So beginning in the first few centuries of the AD time period and continuing for about 1,500 years, small groups of African peoples migrated southward. Historians refer to these people as the Bantu-speaking peoples, and they are known to have originated in modern-day Nigeria, in the southeastern sector of that. So yesterday I taught you in section 1 about the Nok culture. These would have been the descendants of the Nok culture. The city of Jene, the descendants from that as well would make up the Bantu-speaking peoples. Let's talk about why these migrations began. So the Bantu-speaking peoples were generally farmers and herders, so pastoralists, but also settled folks. They developed and diffused the skill of ironworking. We know that was started by the Nok, like I just mentioned. Their farming techniques forced them to move every few years. So what kind of farming technique would they use? Slash and burn farming, right? If you plant the same crop in the same field year after year, that's going to dry up. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to move around to make sure that land lies what we call fallow, and it regenerates those nutrients that are necessary to grow crops. Capital C is going to talk about the causes of this actual migration. So the Bantu moved south, and as they developed agriculture, they learned that they could produce more food that way than through hunting and gathering. This, of course, increased the population, but the agriculture could only produce enough food for a short period of time, as the population continued to increase. So eventually they run out of cultivatable land because of their farming methods and techniques, and they move southward because there are some less densely populated lands that have fertile soil. Capital letter D, we're going to take a look at the effects of migration in this specific case. The Bantu speaking peoples ran into areas that were both sparsely populated and some areas that were more well populated, with people down in this region like the Bambuti and the San, which we learned about being hunter-gatherer tribes in section 1. Now, the Bambuti and the San were not Bantu speakers, and they were still practicing hunter-gatherers. So what ended up happening is when the Bantu came into contact with these people, there really are two routes. One is conflict and warfare, where the Bantu speakers, who generally had settled life prior to this, had better technology. They were able to defeat the Bambuti and the San in some cases, but in other cases there were mixing and blending and some cultural diffusion that took place. Now, the Bantu speakers brought a lot of their ideas and techniques to the areas that they migrated to, which, as I said numerous times today, is another example of cultural diffusion. We know that that term is something that's going to stick with us throughout the remainder of the year. Now, a big question for you guys to ponder as you go into the later parts of this chapter, getting ready for that quiz that's going to come up. How did the Bantu migrations change the history of Africa? If you did the reading, you would know the answer, but that one may come up on your quiz, so make sure that you ponder that, do some research on that question there. Okay, I've got a couple of things to show you, of course, from the text. I'm going to zoom out a little bit as I move about the screen. We went over the push and pull factors, but one thing that I did want to show you is a map here of the Bantu migration. So this is kind of where they come from, modern day southeastern Nigeria. And then you can see all the different migration routes that they take. And they come down here near the Kalahari, down into South Africa, over here into the eastern portions of Africa, usually near water sources are where they're settling so that they can, of course, have water and irrigation for their crops. Notice that they traveled through the rainforest, but never really settled. Like here you can see a point of settlement right here in this part of Africa in the savanna land. But in the rainforest, like we learned, it's mainly uninhabitable by humans. It's not very suitable for human life. Okay. This is a little insert box about one of the Bantu languages, which is Swahili today. Okay. It's the most commonly spoken language in Africa, actually, Swahili is. It uses some of the basic Bantu languages, a mixture of Arabic and also Persian words. This is an example of a mask that Bantu-speaking peoples would have created. And that will be it for Section 2. Section 3 is going to talk about the Kingdom of Aksum. We'll take a look at that in the near future. Thank you.